The sound of a shotgun blast echoed through the valley as Brianna Parker watched her father's silhouette darken the doorway of their modest farmhouse. The year was 1885, and Deeming, New Mexico Territory, was still a wild place where fortunes could be made and lives could be lost in the blink of an eye. "You come back here again, and I won't be aiming at the sky next time," her father bellowed, his voice carrying across the dusty yard to where Garrett Gallagher sat atop his chestnut stallion, hat in hand, and a look of determination etched across his sun-weathered face. "Mr. Parker, please," Garrett called back, his voice steady despite the danger. "I only wish to court your daughter proper." Brianna's father turned to her, his face red with fury. "Inside, now." His voice left no room for argument. As she stepped back into the house, her eyes met Garrett's one last time before her father slammed the door shut. "You'll never see that man again," her father declared, sliding the heavy wooden bolt into place. "I'll not have my daughter running off with some penniless cowpoke who can barely keep himself alive, let alone provide for a family." Tears welled in Brianna's eyes as she watched through the window. Garrett had not moved, still sitting tall in his saddle, staring at the closed door. Finally, he placed his hat back on his head, turned his horse, and rode slowly toward the edge of their property. Just before he crossed the boundary, he stopped and looked back. Though she couldn't hear him, she could read his lips as he spoke words that would change the course of her life forever. "Her father closed the door forever," Garrett said to himself, his voice carrying only to the wind. "Then my gate will never close." Brianna's hand pressed against the glass as she watched the man she loved disappear into the distance, not knowing when or if she would ever see him again. The Parker farm sat on the outskirts of Deeming, a growing town that had sprung up along the Southern Pacific Railroad just a few years earlier. Samuel Parker had been one of the first to settle in the area, claiming 100 acres of land with dreams of building a cattle empire. Those dreams had never quite materialized, but the farm provided well enough for him and his daughter. Brianna's mother had died when she was just 12, leaving Samuel to raise their only child alone. Perhaps that was why he held onto her so tightly. She was all he had left of the woman he had loved. Now, at 21, Brianna found herself trapped between her duty to her father and the yearning of her heart. "He's not worthy of you," Samuel muttered as he hung his shotgun on the wall pegs. "Drifting from ranch to ranch, no permanent home, no prospects. You deserve better, Brianna." "Garrett's a good man, father," she replied softly, wiping away her tears. "He works hard and he's saving to buy his own spread. If you just give him a chance, I've given him all the chances he deserves," Samuel cut her off. "I've seen his kind before, full of promises they can't keep." "You'll thank me someday," but Brianna wasn't so sure. She had met Garrett 6 months ago at a town social. While other cowboys had been loud and boisterous, trying to impress the ladies with tales of their adventures, Garrett had been quiet, thoughtful, offering her a glass of punch and asking about her interests rather than boasting about his own accomplishments. They had danced that night, and the feel of his hand against the small of her back had sent shivers through her body. In the months that followed, they had met whenever possible at church, in town, occasionally at the borders of her father's land. Each encounter deepened her feelings for him. Samuel Parker had noticed, of course. Nothing escaped his attention when it came to his daughter. He had forbidden the courtship, but Brianna had continued to see Garrett in secret, stealing moments together whenever possible. Until today, when her father had caught them together beneath the old cottonwood tree at the edge of the property. Garrett had been reading poetry to her Tennyson, his favorite when Samuel had appeared with his shotgun. Now, as night fell over the Parker farm, Brianna lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what Garrett had meant by his parting words. "His gate will never close." What gate? Garrett owned no property that she knew of. He worked as a ranch hand at the Blackwell, spread a few miles outside of town. Sleep came fitfully that night, with dreams of doors closing and gates opening, and Garrett's face just beyond her reach. The next morning, Brianna went about her chores mechanically, her mind elsewhere. She collected eggs from the henhouse, fed the horses, and helped prepare breakfast, all while her father watched her with a mixture of concern and stubbornness. "It's for the best, Bri," he said as they ate. "You'll see that in time." She nodded but said nothing, pushing her eggs around her plate without eating much. When breakfast was finished, Samuel announced he was riding into town for supplies and to discuss cattle prices with some of the other ranchers. "I'll be back before sundown," he said, grabbing his hat from the peg by the door. "Stay close to the house." The meaning was clear: don't go looking for that cowboy. After her father had gone, Brianna completed her household chores, then sat on the front porch with her mending, her mind drifting to Garrett. What was he doing now? Had he given up on her already? The sound of approaching hoofbeats startled her from her thoughts. For a moment, her heart leapt with the hope that it might be Garrett, but instead she saw her neighbor, Mrs. Hollister, riding up on her dappled mare. "Morning, Brianna," the older woman called as she approached. "Your father in?" "He's gone to town," Brianna replied, setting aside her mending. "Can I help you with something?" "Oh, I just wanted to let him know that we've hired a new hand to help with our north pasture. Young fellow named Gallagher. Your father knows him, I believe." Brianna's heart skipped a beat. "Garrett Gallagher?" "That's right," Mrs. Hollister said with a nod. "Strong young man, good with horses. Said he needed steady work. Our property borders yours to the north. Just thought your father should know, in case he sees someone working near the boundary line." The Hollister Ranch lay directly north of the Parker farm, separated only by a small stream that marked the property line. It was less than a mile from the house. "I'll let him know," Brianna said, trying to keep her voice steady. Mrs. Hollister nodded, then turned her horse. "He seems a decent sort. Quiet, respectful. Thomas says he's one of the hardest workers he's ever hired." After Mrs. Hollister had gone, Brianna stood on the porch, her mind racing. Garrett had taken a job at the neighboring ranch, deliberately positioning himself close to her despite her father's warnings. That must be what he meant about his gate never closing. He wasn't giving up on her. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. Her father would be furious if he found out. But the possibility of seeing Garrett again, perhaps even regularly, made her heart soar. For the next week, Brianna found reasons to walk the northern boundary of their property. Each day, she would carry a basket as if gathering wild berries or herbs, and each day, she would scan the horizon for any sign of Garrett. On the 7th day, she finally spotted him, riding along the fence line of the Hollister property. He saw her at the same moment, and after a quick glance around to ensure they were alone, he guided his horse across the stream to where she stood. "Brianna," he said, his voice warm with affection as he dismounted. "I was beginning to think you hadn't gotten my message." "What message?" she asked, her eyes drinking in the sight of him. He looked tired but determined, his blue eyes as intense as ever. "I asked Mrs. Hollister to mention I'd been hired on," he explained, taking a step closer. "I couldn't stay away, Bri, not after what your father said." "He's forbidden me from seeing you," she whispered, glancing nervously back toward the house, though it was well out of sight beyond a rise in the land. "I know," Garrett nodded, "but I meant what I said that day. If your father has closed his door to me, then my gate will always remain open for you. I took this job so I could be near you, so we could find a way." He reached for her hand, and she let him take it, feeling the rough calluses on his palm from years of hard work. "It's dangerous, Garrett." "If my father finds out, I know the risk," he interrupted gently. "But some things are worth risking everything for. You're worth it, Brianna." They stood there for a long moment, hands clasped, the stream burbling beside them and the New Mexico sun warm on their faces. "I can't meet you here often," she finally said. "Father would grow suspicious." "There's an old line shack on the far northern edge of the Hollister property," Garrett told her. "It's abandoned now. They built a new one closer to their main house, but it's still standing. If you can ever get away, leave a red ribbon tied to that twisted cottonwood by the stream. I'll check it every day, and I'll meet you at the line shack that evening after sundown." It was a risky plan, but Brianna nodded. "I'll find a way," she promised. Garrett reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn book. "I brought you this," he said, pressing it into her hands, "so you'd know I was thinking of you." It was a volume of poetry, Tennyson again. Inside the cover, he had written, "To Brianna, whose smile outshines the New Mexico sun. Until we meet again, G." She clutched the book to her chest, tears threatening to spill. "I should go," she said reluctantly. "Father could return early." Garrett nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Be careful, Bri, and remember my gate is always open." As she hurried back toward the house, Brianna felt both exhilarated and afraid. She was defying her father, risking his anger and disappointment. But the thought of never seeing Garrett again was more painful than she could bear. 2 days later, Samuel Parker announced he would be traveling to Las Cruces on business and would be gone overnight. It was the opportunity Brianna had been waiting for. As soon as her father's wagon disappeared down the road, she rode to the twisted cottonwood and tied a red ribbon to one of its gnarled branches. That evening, with her heart pounding in her chest, she saddled her mare and rode north across their property, telling herself she would be back long before her father returned the next day. The line shack was small and weathered, but Garrett had cleaned it up. A lantern glowed in the window and smoke curled from the chimney. When she dismounted, the door opened and he stood there, silhouetted against the warm light from within. "You came," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "Of course I came," she replied, stepping toward him. Inside, he had prepared a simple meal, and they sat together at the rough wooden table, talking of their lives, their dreams, and their future. Garrett spoke of the land he hoped to buy someday, where they could raise cattle and horses, build a home, start a family. "I know I don't have much to offer you now," he admitted, reaching across the table to take her hand. "But I promise you, Brianna, I will work every day of my life to give you the home and the life you deserve." "I don't need riches," she told him earnestly. "Just you." As the night grew late, Garrett walked her to her horse. "When will I see you again?" he asked. "I don't know," she admitted. "Father watches me closely, but I'll find a way." He helped her mount, then looked up at her, his eyes reflecting the starlight. "I love you, Brianna Parker. Nothing your father does will change that." "I love you too," she whispered back, knowing in her heart it was true. The next few weeks fell into a pattern. Whenever Samuel Parker was away from the farm, which wasn't often, Brianna would leave her signal at the cottonwood and meet Garrett at the line shack. Their meetings were brief but precious, each one strengthening the bond between them. During one such meeting, as they sat before the fire in the line shack, Garrett took her hands in his. "I can't go on like this," he said solemnly, "meeting in secret, always looking over our shoulders." Brianna's heart sank. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we need to make a decision." "Your father isn't going to change his mind. Not anytime soon, anyway." "Then what do we do?" she asked, fear and hope mingling in her chest. "Come away with me," Garrett said, his eyes intense. "Not forever, just to Santa Fe. We can be married there and then return. Once we're husband and wife, your father will have to accept it." The proposal took her breath away. Eloping would devastate her father. He would see it as the ultimate betrayal. And yet, the thought of being Garrett's wife, of building a life with him, filled her with joy. "I need time to think," she said finally. "It's not a decision to make lightly." Garrett nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Take all the time you need, but know that whenever you're ready, my offer stands. My gate will never close to you, Brianna." The ride home that night was filled with conflicting emotions. Brianna loved her father. He had raised her alone, worked hard to provide for her, protected her. Could she really hurt him this way? But she loved Garrett too. In the months she had known him, he had shown her nothing but respect, kindness, and devotion. He worked hard, saved his money, dreamed of building something meaningful. Why couldn't her father see the man he truly was? As she approached the farm, Brianna noticed a light still burning in the window. Strange, her father usually retired early. Her stomach knotted with apprehension as she stabled her horse and approached the house. Samuel Parker sat at the kitchen table, a glass of whiskey before him and a red ribbon, her signal ribbon, twined around his fingers. "Where have you been?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. "I went for a ride," she replied, her mouth suddenly dry. "The night was so beautiful I lost track of time." "Don't lie to me, Brianna," he said, holding up the ribbon. "I found this at the cottonwood by the stream. Mrs. Hollister told me her new hand was Gallagher. It didn't take much to figure out what was happening." Her heart pounded in her chest. "Father, please, I trusted you," he interrupted, his voice breaking. "I believed you understood that I only want what's best for you." "Garrett is what's best for me," she said, gathering her courage. "If you would just give him a chance." Samuel slammed his hand on the table, making her jump. "That man has nothing to offer you, no land, no home, no security." "He has love," Brianna countered, tears streaming down her face. "He loves me, Father, and I love him." "Love doesn't put food on the table or a roof over your head," Samuel growled. "I've worked too hard, sacrificed too much to see you throw your life away on a drifter." "He's not a drifter," she insisted. "He's saving for his own land." "He has plans, dreams. Dreams don't build a future," her father cut her off. "I'm putting an end to this right now. Tomorrow, I'm sending you to your Aunt Martha's in Denver. You'll stay there until you come to your senses." The pronouncement hit Brianna like a physical blow. Aunt Martha was her father's sister, a stern, joyless woman who had never married and seemed to resent those who found happiness in life. "You can't do this," she whispered, shock giving way to anger. "I'm 21 years old, not a child." "As long as you live under my roof, you'll abide by my rules," Samuel said firmly. "Pack your things. The stage leaves at noon tomorrow." That night, Brianna lay awake, tears soaking her pillow. The thought of being sent away, of not seeing Garrett again, was unbearable. By dawn, she had made her decision. While her father was out checking the livestock, she hastily packed a small bag with her most essential belongings. Then, she wrote a letter, explaining her choice and asking for understanding, even forgiveness someday. She left it on her bed where he would find it. With a heavy heart but determined spirit, she saddled her mare and rode north, not toward the line shack this time, but directly to the Hollister ranch house. Mrs. Hollister received her with surprise, but without judgment. "Garrett's out with the cattle," she said, "but he should be back by midday." "May I wait for him?" Brianna asked, her voice trembling slightly. "It's important." The older woman nodded, a knowing look in her eyes. "Trouble at home." "My father wants to send me away," Brianna admitted, "to Denver." I can't go." Mrs. Hollister gestured for her to sit at the kitchen table, then poured her a cup of coffee. "Your father's a proud man," she said gently, "and he loves you fiercely, but sometimes love can make people hold on too tight." "I love him too," Brianna said, tears threatening again. "But I love Garrett as well. Why must I choose?" "Sometimes life forces choices on us," Mrs. Hollister replied. "The question is, which choice can you live with?" They sat in silence for a while, the clock on the wall ticking away the minutes. Finally, they heard the sound of horses approaching, and Brianna's heart leapt. Garrett entered the kitchen, covered in dust from the range, and stopped short when he saw her. "Brianna, what's happened?" In a rush of words, she explained her father's discovery and his plan to send her away. Garrett's face darkened with each word, but he let her finish before speaking. "Then we have no choice," he said finally, looking from Brianna to Mrs. Hollister. "We need to leave today. Now." "Leave," Brianna echoed, the reality of what she was contemplating suddenly hitting her full force. "To Santa Fe, like we discussed," Garrett nodded. "We can be married there, then decide our next steps." Mrs. Hollister cleared her throat. "If I might make a suggestion," she said carefully. "Running away rarely solves problems, it often creates new ones. What choice do we have?" Garrett asked, his frustration evident. "Her father won't listen to reason." "Perhaps," the older woman agreed, "but he might listen to someone else, someone he respects." She turned to Brianna. "Your father and Judge Wilson have been friends for years, haven't they?" Brianna nodded. Judge Ezekiel Wilson was one of the most respected men in Deeming, known for his fairness and wisdom. He had been a friend to Samuel Parker since they had both settled in the territory. "If the judge were to speak on your behalf, Garrett," Mrs. Hollister continued, "it might make a difference. At the very least, it might buy some time for cooler heads to prevail." Garrett looked unconvinced, but Brianna felt a flicker of hope. "It's worth trying," she said. "I don't want to leave my father with nothing but a letter and a lifetime of bitterness. If there's any chance we could have his blessing, or at least his acceptance, I want to try." After some discussion, a plan was formed. Mrs. Hollister would ride to town immediately to speak with Judge Wilson, explaining the situation. Garrett would return Brianna to her home to face her father and prevent him from sending her away before the judge could intervene. "Are you sure about this?" Garrett asked as they rode toward the Parker farm. "If it doesn't work, then we'll leave," Brianna said firmly. "But I have to try, Garrett, for my father's sake as much as my own." They reached the farm to find Samuel Parker loading his wagon with supplies for the journey to the stage station. When he saw them approaching together, his face hardened into a mask of anger. "Get off my land," he ordered Garrett, reaching for his shotgun. "Father, please," Brianna implored, dismounting quickly. "Just listen to us." "There's nothing to say," Samuel replied coldly. "You've made your choice clear enough." "Mr. Parker," Garrett began, staying on his horse but removing his hat respectfully. "I understand your concerns. I know you want security for your daughter. But you know nothing," Samuel interrupted. "You think love is enough. That pretty words and promises will keep her safe, fed, and happy. Life is harder than that, boy." "I know it is, sir," Garrett agreed. "I've been working since I was 14 years old. I've saved nearly every penny. I have enough for a down payment on a small spread north of here." "It's not much yet, but not much," Samuel echoed with a bitter laugh. "And that's what you offer my daughter, not much." "It's a start," Garrett insisted. "A foundation to build on." "Father," Brianna stepped forward, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I'm not going to Denver. I'm not a child anymore. I love you and I always will, but I love Garrett too. I want to build a life with him." Samuel's face paled at her words. "So that's it. You're choosing him over your family, over everything I've worked to provide for you." "I'm not choosing one over the other," she said gently. "I'm asking you not to make me choose, to accept the man I love." Before Samuel could respond, they heard the sound of an approaching wagon. Judge Wilson sat at the reins, with Mrs. Hollister beside him. They pulled up to the house, and the judge nodded gravely to Samuel. "Ezekiel," Samuel acknowledged, confusion mixing with the anger on his face. "What brings you out here?" "A matter of some importance, it seems," the judge replied, climbing down from the wagon. He was a tall man with silver hair and a neatly trimmed beard, his bearing dignified without being pompous. "Mrs. Hollister has shared an interesting story with me. Perhaps we could speak inside." Samuel looked from the judge to his daughter to Garrett, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he nodded curtly. Inside. The next hour was one of the most difficult in Brianna's life. Seated at the kitchen table with her father, Garrett, Judge Wilson, and Mrs. Hollister, she listened as they discussed her future as if it were a legal case to be argued. Her father laid out his objections to Garrett: his lack of property, his years as a drifting ranch hand, his inability to provide the kind of life Samuel wanted for his daughter. Garrett countered with his plans for the future, his savings, and most importantly, his love and commitment to Brianna. Through it all, Judge Wilson listened patiently, asking occasional questions but offering no judgments. Mrs. Hollister spoke of Garrett's character, his work ethic, and the genuine affection she had observed between the young couple. Finally, when everyone had spoken their piece, the judge turned to Brianna. "And what do you want, my dear? Not what your father wants for you or what Garrett promises you, but what do you truly want for your own life?" Brianna took a deep breath, looking from her father to Garrett. "I want a life with purpose and love," she said softly. "I want to build something meaningful, to work hard for a future that matters. I want children someday, a home filled with laughter and warmth. She turned to her father. You've taught me the value of hard work, of integrity, of standing by those you love even when times are difficult. Those lessons are part of me now, and they always will be. Then she looked at Garrett. And I believe, with all my heart, that Garrett and I can create that life together. It won't be easy. It will take time and patience and sacrifice, but we're both willing to make those sacrifices. Judge Wilson nodded thoughtfully. Samuel, he said, turning to her father, I've known you for 15 years. You're a good man, a fair man. When Alina died, you raised this girl alone, and you did a fine job of it. She's intelligent, strong, and clearly knows her own mind. Samuel's expression softened slightly at the mention of his late wife. I promised Alina I'd take care of her, he said quietly. Keep her safe. And you have, the judge assured him. But there comes a time when we must let our children find their own path. The greatest gift we can give them then is our trust in the foundation we've provided. He turned to Garrett. Young man, I've made some inquiries about you. Sheriff Collins speaks highly of your character. Several ranchers in the area have commented on your hard work and honesty. These are good qualities, important ones. The judge leaned back in his chair, looking from one face to another. Here's what I propose. Garrett, you say you have savings for land. Samuel, you have concerns about stability. What if there was a way to address both? The proposal was unexpected but elegant in its simplicity. Samuel Parker's 100 acres were more than he could effectively work alone, especially as he got older. The northern section, the very area where Brianna and Garrett had been meeting, was fertile but undeveloped. Judge Wilson suggested that Samuel deed 20 acres of that land to Brianna as an early inheritance. Garrett would use his savings not to buy separate property, but to develop that land, building a house, buying cattle, making improvements. They would work side by side with Samuel, learning from his experience while bringing their own energy to the enterprise. In time, the judge concluded, the Parker Ranch could grow into something truly significant, a legacy for future generations. Samuel was silent for a long moment, his weathered hands wrapped around his coffee cup. Finally, he looked at Garrett. You'd be willing to do that? Work alongside me instead of striking out on your own? Yes, sir, Garrett replied without hesitation. I'd be honored to learn from you and to be part of building something that would last beyond all of us. And you'd take proper care of my daughter. Promise me that. With every breath in my body, Garrett vowed. Samuel turned to Brianna, his eyes softening. Is this truly what you want, Bri? Not just him, but this life? It won't be easy. I know, she said, reaching across the table to take her father's hand. But nothing worth having ever is. And yes, this is what I want. To build a future with Garrett, but to keep you in our lives too. I don't want to choose between the people I love. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. Then, slowly, Samuel Parker extended his hand to Garrett Gallagher. If you break her heart, he said gruffly, there's nowhere in this territory you could hide from me. Yes, sir, Garrett replied, shaking the offered hand firmly. I understand completely. That evening, after Judge Wilson and Mrs. Hollister had gone, the three of them walked the northern boundary of the Parker property. Samuel pointed out the best location for a house, where the well should be dug, which areas would be best for grazing. As the sun set over the New Mexico landscape, painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple, Brianna stood between the two men she loved most in the world, her heart full to bursting. You know, her father said, looking at the twisted cottonwood tree where Brianna had left her signals, my Alina would have liked you, Gallagher. She had a weakness for stubborn men with dreams. Garrett smiled. I wish I could have met her. She's here, Samuel replied quietly. In the land, in the sky, in our Brianna. The wedding took place 6 weeks later in the small church in Deeming. It seemed the whole town turned out for the occasion. Mrs. Hollister had helped Brianna make her wedding dress, a simple but elegant creation of ivory satin with lace at the collar and cuffs. Garrett wore a new suit, looking so handsome that Brianna's breath caught when she first saw him waiting at the altar. Judge Wilson performed the ceremony, his deep voice filling the church as he spoke of commitment, partnership, and love that endures all seasons. When it came time for Brianna to be given away, Samuel Parker placed her hand in Garrett's with dignity and grace. "Take care of each other," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We will," they promised in unison. The celebration afterward was joyous, with music and dancing lasting well into the night. As the new couple prepared to leave for their honeymoon a week in Santa Fe, courtesy of Judge Wilson and his wife Samuel approached them one last time. "The door to your home on our land will be finished by the time you return," he told them. "I've been working on it myself. Solid oak with good strong hinges." "Thank you, Father," Brianna said, embracing him tightly. "Remember what I said, Gallagher," Samuel added, shaking his son-in-law's hand. "That door swings both ways. It's meant to welcome, not to shut people out. I learned that lesson the hard way." "Yes, sir," Garrett nodded seriously. "My gate will never close to family." The first year of marriage brought both joys and challenges. Building their home on the Parker land took longer than expected, with delays caused by spring rains and unexpected shortages of lumber. For the first few months, they lived in a temporary cabin, working from dawn until dusk alongside Samuel to prepare for their first cattle drive. Their house, when it was finally completed, was modest but sturdy 2 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen, and a front porch that caught the evening breeze. Garrett had insisted on certain touches. Bookshelves for Brianna's growing collection, a stone fireplace that would warm the whole house in winter, large windows to let in the New Mexico light. Samuel came to dinner every Sunday, bringing vegetables from his garden and stories from town. Gradually, the awkwardness between him and Garrett gave way to genuine respect and even friendship. They didn't always agree. Both were stubborn men with strong opinions, but they learned to listen to each other, to find common ground. By the end of that first year, the Parker Ranch was flourishing. With Garrett's energy and Samuel's experience, they had increased the herd, improved the grazing land, and established a reputation for quality that brought buyers from as far away as Colorado. And Brianna. She bloomed like a desert flower after rain. The love between her and Garrett deepened with each passing day. She managed the household accounts, planted an orchard that would one day provide fruit for their table, and spent evenings on the porch with Garrett, reading poetry or simply watching the stars. In the spring of their second year of marriage, Brianna discovered she was expecting their first child. The news brought tears to Samuel's eyes and a look of wonder to Garrett's face. "A baby," he whispered, placing his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." "The first of many, I hope," Brianna replied, covering his hand with her own. When their son was born that winter, a healthy boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined chin, they named him Samuel Garrett Gallagher. The elder Samuel held his namesake with trembling hands, his weathered face soft with emotion. "He's perfect," the old rancher declared. "Absolutely perfect." Life settled into a rhythm of seasons and milestones. The Parker Gallagher Ranch grew in reputation and prosperity. 2 years after little Sammy's birth, Brianna gave birth to twin girls, Alina and Grace, named for her mother and Mrs. Hollister, who had become like family to them. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Garrett surprised Brianna with a special gift. He had commissioned a wrought iron gate for the entrance to their property with an inscription worked into the metal. "This gate will never close. To remind us of our promise," he explained as they stood together, admiring the craftsmanship, "and to welcome all who come in peace." Samuel, now showing his years but still active in the running of the ranch, nodded his approval. "Good strong work," he commented, running his hand along the ironwork. "Built to last generations." That evening, after the children were asleep and Samuel had returned to his own house nearby, Brianna and Garrett sat on their porch, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the moon rise over the mountains. Are you happy?" Garrett asked, a question he still posed occasionally, as if making sure he was fulfilling his promises. "More than I ever dreamed possible," Brianna replied truthfully. "We've built something beautiful here, Garrett. Not just the ranch or the house, but this life, our family." He kissed her then, still with the same tenderness as when they had first met. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "The way it all began, with your father opposing us so strongly?" Brianna considered the question seriously. "No," she said finally. "It wasn't easy, but the struggle made us stronger. And in the end, it brought us all closer together. My father wouldn't have gotten to know you, truly know you, if we hadn't had to fight for our love." Garrett nodded, his gaze moving to the distant figure of Samuel's house, where a single lamp still burned in the window. "He's a good man, your father. I'm proud to work alongside him, to learn from him." "And he's proud of you," Brianna assured him. "He told me so just last week, said you were the son he never had but always wanted." They sat in comfortable silence for a while longer, listening to the night sounds of the desert and the occasional soft murmur from the children's room. 10 years from now," Garrett said thoughtfully, "this ranch will be twice the size it is today. The children will be helping with the cattle. Maybe we'll have another baby or 2, or 3, Brianna teased, leaning her head against his shoulder. "The point is," he continued, smiling at her joke, "we're building something that will outlast us. Something for our children and their children after them." "All because a stubborn cowboy refused to give up," Brianna said, turning to face him. "Because his gate would never close. And because a brave young woman was willing to stand up for love," Garrett added, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Even when it meant standing against her father." "Love finds a way," Brianna whispered, echoing the words Judge Wilson had spoken at their wedding. "Always." As the years passed, their prediction proved true. The Parker Gallagher Ranch became one of the most successful in the territory. Their family grew a 4th child, a boy named Thomas, joined the family when the twins were 4. The children thrived in the freedom of ranch life, learning the value of hard work and the importance of family bonds. Samuel Parker lived to see his 80th birthday, surrounded by his grandchildren and the legacy he had helped to build. In his final years, he had become a gentler man, quick to laugh and slow to anger, devoted to his grandchildren and proud of the ranch that bore his name alongside Gallagher's. When he passed peacefully in his sleep one winter night, the entire community of Deeming came to pay their respects. Judge Wilson, now retired but still a respected figure, spoke at the funeral of Samuel's integrity, his perseverance, and the love he had for his family. He learned, perhaps later than some, that the strongest doors are the ones that remain open, the judge said, glancing at Garrett and Brianna. And that the greatest legacy a person can leave is not land or cattle or money, but the love they have shared and the lives they have touched. After the funeral, as they stood together at the freshly dug grave, Brianna took Garrett's hand in hers. "He loved you, you know," she said softly. "In the end, he loved you like a son." "And I loved him," Garrett replied, his voice rough with emotion. "He made me a better man, a better rancher. Everything we have, we built together." That evening, the family gathered at the ranch house Brianna and Garrett, their 4 children now ranging from teenagers to young adults, and close friends who had become like family over the years. They shared memories of Samuel, laughing at his stubbornness, marveling at his wisdom, honoring the foundation he had laid for all of them. As night fell, Garrett stood and raised his glass in a toast. "To Samuel Parker," he said, his voice carrying through the room, "who taught me that true strength isn't about keeping people out, but about having the courage to let them in." "To Grandfather," the children echoed, raising their glasses. Later, when the guests had gone and the children had retired to their rooms, Brianna and Garrett stood on their porch, just as they had countless nights before. The ranch spread out before them, peaceful under the stars, cattle grazing in the distance, the iron gate at the entrance still standing strong after all these years. "We did it," Brianna said, leaning against her husband's solid frame. Everything we dreamed of that day by the stream. We built it together. And we're still building, Garrett replied, his arm tightening around her waist. Still growing. The children will take it even further than we have. They stood in silence for a moment, contemplating the future stretching out before them, the generations that would follow in their footsteps. Then Garrett turned to her, a familiar light in his eyes despite the silver now threading through his hair. "Do you remember what I said to you that day when your father closed his door to me?" Brianna smiled, the memory still clear after all these years. "You said your gate would never close. And it never has," he said softly. "Not to you, not to our family, not to anyone who comes in friendship. That's the promise I made, and it's the promise I've kept." As they walked hand in hand back into the home they had built together, Brianna reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From secret meetings by a stream to a thriving ranch, and a family filled with love all, because a stubborn cowboy and a determined young woman had refused to give up on each other. Outside, the gate stood open under the New Mexico moon, a symbol of the love that had transformed not just their lives, but the lives of everyone around them. A love that had opened doors instead of closing them, that had built bridges instead of walls, that had created a legacy of openness and welcome that would endure for generations to come. And in the gentle night breeze, Brianna could almost hear her father's voice, finally understanding and approving. "Keep that gate open, Gallagher. That's how love finds its way home."